under being asked many of the same questions. I appreciate the inherent boredom in being asked many of the same questions, but
No.
I'll share something that I think may be a slightly different response to the film, which I have seen twice and have praised to the heavens, and I think it's brilliant.
Thank you, sir.
Every teabagger, every mom and pop should see it. And of course I said in my column, will they see it? The only people that pay to see documentaries are the liberal intelligentsia in the cities. Am I saying something wrong here?
Well, I don't know. I'll be very interested to see what happens with the film.
I mean, it's great. It's one of the most brilliant tutorials, or whatever you want to call it. I'm not trying to in any way dismiss or denigrate. I just think people just say, documentary, you're not going to see it.
We'll see. I honestly don't know what to expect in that regard. I will say that I tried to make it in such a way that it was certainly not partisan and not ideological, and would be something that would be of interest based on its factual content rather than a kind of prearranged point of view. And we will see whether A, I achieve that, and B, whether it makes a difference in terms of who sees it.
If I were one of those banker guys and you had come to me saying you wish to speak to me, I would have gone to see, I would have rented No End in Sight. And I would have come to the not difficult to reach conclusion that you're pretty appalled at our handling of the Iraq after we invaded.
Yep.
Pretty obvious.
Yep.
So it wouldn't strike me that you were likely to be naturally in favor of the financial system as it has unfolded in the last few years.
Some of the people who declined to be interviewed came to exactly the same conclusion. I will say, though, that some of the people, including some of the most surprising people who agreed to be interviewed, had seen it. David McCormick, for example. David McCormick, who I have known slightly for a long time. I met him, I don't know, somewhere between 10 and 15 years ago through a foundation. And who was involved in high technology. David McCormick went to West Point, was a battalion commander in the First Gulf War, and had seen my film on Iraq, and yet still agreed to be interviewed.
Do you think that some of those guys who agreed to be interviewed by you were swayed by the fact that you're a rich guy and that you understood how rich people think and act? You know, there's a certain club or a mentality that goes with having means and being a person of some financial comfort, you know, as opposed to some impoverished college filmmaker, you know, who might be.
I doubt it. You know, I don't know how much they knew about my background. It's not what I told them. You know, I certainly didn't tell them.
Right.
Of course, it's public information. If they Googled me, then they learned that I had started a software company and that I had made some money from it. I didn't get the sense that that was much to do with it. I think that more of it was that if you're referring to the people that I ended up being quite contentious with, I think that it's more that these are people who are not used to being challenged. They're people who are used to others being deferential to them. They're used to their students and their employees and their subordinates and even the media being deferential to them.
It's very, very emotionally satisfying when that particular gentleman is it Columbia, the one who loses his temper?
Yes. Yeah.
Very emotionally satisfying because they're all in lockstep, at least the ones who have something to. They're basically saying, seems to me, the same thing. I have made so much money from this arrangement that you're asking me about, or my friends have made so much money, or I'm likely to continue to make so much money, that I just can't be candid with you.
Yeah.
And they keep saying the same thing. And it's like, you know, will somebody break a plate over somebody's head? Do something. And this guy finally, you know, which is wonderful. I just thought it was great.
I confess,
and you do it in the most patient and considerate way. It's wonderful.
I tried to keep my cool, and most of the time I succeeded.
Yeah.
And I must confess that some of the time I was enjoying myself.
I love that you say the word "wow" at one point, which is an excellent, you know.
Oh.
You know.
Well, that was quite sincere. I mean,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
when I asked Christine Lagarde when she learned that Lehman was going to go bankrupt, I didn't know what
Right.
the answer was. I assumed that the answer was going to be, you know, a few days before, something like that. And when she told me it was only after they had declared bankruptcy.
Right. Another brilliant thing is starting it off with Iceland, which I think many of us perhaps are not as well versed on, but I thought it was brilliant to start it there and say this is just a small example of what has happened elsewhere, and very good. Did that hit you hit upon that? Was that part of the strategy initially, or did it hit you in editing? That was the way to start.
The latter. I had known what happened in Iceland, and we went there and filmed there. Filmed a lot there, actually.
Right.
But I didn't know where it would go in the film. And we put together this sequence, and I just thought, oh my God.
Why did you choose Matt Damon to be the narrator? He's, I mean, why him as opposed to Keanu Reeves or whomever? Well, how did that happen?
Well, he was somebody who's... I didn't... It's not like I knew a lot about him, and I certainly didn't know him personally. I had never met him.
Right.
But I had a sense, and people had told me that he was an intelligent man who was who was interested in political and policy matters in an intelligent way,
Right.
and to whom this might appeal. And that proved to be totally true. You know, he was also just great to work with. He was just a great guy. But he was very astute, and he actually had, and he took the time to read the transcript of the film carefully, quite carefully. It was clear that he had read it thoroughly and understood every word. And he had several very good suggestions that we incorporated in the film.
No, good.
So it was actually a very cool experience.
When I heard that you were working on this documentary, and I also knew that Michael Moore was rushing these things in, I thought that people might see your work as well as his in somewhat the same light. Did you happen to wind up seeing his film ever?
I did see his film, sure. When it came out, I watched it.
You saw it right away?
Sure,
Okay.
yeah.
And what did you think of what he did? How would it compare with yours, or how is it different? Or?
It's very different. You know, Michael Moore is a very ideological guy,
Right.
and he's also a character. You know, in every sense, he's a character in his films, and he's also he's a character. You know,
Right.
and I'm just not that kind of guy. You know, and my films are just not those kinds of films. So, just a very different beast.
You just get the enormous sense of trust in watching Inside Job. I feel that, without knowing it factually, but I feel that it has been extremely strict in its vetting and the facts. I mean, this could stand up to the most hostile examination by anyone.
Thank you, and that is true. I am extremely confident that everything in that film is correct.
Do you have like 2 or 3 friends who you bring in as devil's advocates to try and talk you out of keeping this part in or whatever, just to be extra tough? Do you do that as a kind of an exercise?
I had many people who I consulted in that regard.
Right.
One of them, another person that I met about 15 years ago, I guess,
Right.
was John Fain, who, when I met him, was the president of Goldman Sachs. And then later ran the New York Stock Exchange, and then became briefly the CEO of Merrill Lynch.
Right.
And I asked him, I asked to interview him. He declined, but he did agree to speak with me off the record.
Right.
And I had many long conversations with him.
Right.
And he certainly, doesn't agree with me about things.
I'm being kicked out of here, but